Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to another edition of the Dogland Podcast. I am your host, Jackson McCurry. No Anthony Jokey with us on this episode, but do have a special guest. He's a friend of the show, been on the show a few times, and we're always appreciative that he makes time for us, especially when it comes to Browns versus Patriots, which is obviously the big matchup this week. He is the host of Pat's Pulpit. You can also find his work at the NFL Wire and also Bleeding Green Nation Radio. It is Mark Schofield. Mark, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Jackson. How are you, buddy?
I am good. I like just before we hit the record button, I said it's been a crazy last 7 to 10 days for the Cleveland Browns. So many twists and turns. There's positives, there's negatives, but like I said, we're on to New England, as your coach in New England would say. We're on to the next opponent. So obviously Browns Patriots this week, big matchup. But before we get to Browns Patriots, Mark, you do break down quarterbacks. We had you on back in 2018 prior to the draft talking about the quarterbacks. And Monday you happen to drop a clip. I think you do every Monday of Baker Mayfield, but and some of the throws that he makes in a game. But what are you seeing from Baker right now? And do you think there is a correlation between him having success without OBJ and the struggles that he did when OBJ was on the field?
To that last point, Jackson, I think the numbers and the film sort of are in sync on this. When Baker did seem a more comfortable, confident, decisive quarterback on Sunday without Odell. There were times when you could see it, whether it was the Chargers game, whether it was the Arizona game. There were moments when either a concept was called where Odell was the primary read and Baker didn't trust making that throw. There was a fourth down slant concept against Arizona, for example, where Baker was the read. And Odell was the read and Baker just didn't pull the trigger. Or was the fourth down drop against the Chargers, for example. There have just been moments this year where when those two were on the field, they could just never get synced up right, and that's something I was watching from afar, something I was seeing on film. The numbers bear it out as well. And then you see how he looked Sunday against the Bengals, and it's a much more decisive quarterback. He's working through reads. He's patient at times. He had, a throw that I didn't get into that video that I did, but the lawn out route, curl route to Chubb out of the, when he was aligned out to the boundary along the right side, where he had to work through reads and be patient. Obviously the touchdown to Njoku where he's looking off the safety in the middle of the field. He just did seem like a much more comfortable and decisive quarterback without Odell on the field. And I think you've seen that over the course of that Odell time in Cleveland, where those two couldn't get on the same page. And Baker just seemed like a more complete quarterback when he didn't have Odell on the field. And, I know a lot of people have sort of wondered, well, who's to blame? Is it a Baker problem? Was it an Odell problem? I think, Jackson, there's a situation where there's a little bit of blame for everybody. There were times when maybe Odell freelanced a little bit or didn't complete plays when he could have. There were times when Baker wasn't getting his eyes to him on the backside dig or wasn't connected with him on some vertical throws. And you could also look at Stefanski and how he kind of used Odell at times. My colleague at USA Today, Doug Farrar, wrote about how they used him as sort of a vertical stretch decoy type player. Seth Galina of Pro Football Focus did a great video about how they used Odell sometimes on the backside dig in 3-by-1 formations, but Baker wasn't getting his eyes to the backside dig. And so I think it's a situation, Jackson, where there's kind of blame to go around, but it does look like the organization just came to a conclusion that, look, we're going to go forward with this quarterback. We're going to go forward with this offensive philosophy, and Odell might just kind of be the odd man out at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that I just feel like everyone had a hand in why it didn't work. And I think the best thing was that the organization didn't try to drag it any further, and they just decided it was time to move on and just to go forward to try to salvage a season that was starting to fall apart.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. You have a situation where your quarterback, who all indications are they're going to come to us an agreement on an extension with Baker Mayfield. And, whether the dollars end up being 30, 40, whatever they end up being, you have to put him in a position to be successful. And if you're going to go ahead and make that decision to go ahead with Baker, then if you've come to the conclusion as an organization that the relationship between 6 and 13 is a detriment to 6 and going all in on him, then I think it becomes an easy decision.
Yeah, without question. Moving forward to Browns Patriots, this is why we had you on the pod today. Browns and Patriots both at 5-4 in a very tight AFC wild card race right now. The Patriots last year was kind of I would say a retooling year. They kind of had to, work through some things in the first year, the post Brady era, and then they come back, were very active in free agency. They get the quarterback that I think everybody assumes that's the guy that they wanted all along with the 15th pick, didn't have to move up to get him in Mac Jones. And I kind of want to start with Mac Jones, Mark. What are you seeing from him as he is developing as a rookie quarterback? Because I've been thoroughly impressed from the little Patriots that I've gotten to watch. I'm going to watch some more this week, but I've been overall impressed. And I feel like Jones going to New England was the best situation out of any of the rookie quarterbacks in this draft class.
Yeah, I think starting there, Jackson, it probably was the best situation. You might make a case that, Trey Lance in San Francisco, from a schematic standpoint, from a play caller standpoint, might have been a pretty good landing spot because of the similarities between that Niners offense and what Trey Lance was doing at North Dakota State. But in terms of not just the scheme fit, but the coaching staff, the stability in the coaching staff, New England is a very good landing spot for a young quarterback because Belichick has been there for decades. Josh McDaniels has been there for a while. We're coming off an off season, like, where the Patriots spent a ton of money in free agency. They've been a very good defensive team, and they look to be, again, figuring out what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball in the past couple of weeks. They've had some good games on the defensive side of the football. And so it's an environment where you could put a rookie quarterback into that starting lineup, and you don't have to ask him to do a ton right away. You can look at run game. You can look at short passing, quick pass and ball control pass and offense, what you can do on the defensive side of the ball and sort of let him come along, at his speed. I think specific to Mac Jones, you can see signs each week that they're asking him to do a little bit more at times, that he's taking on a little bit more, that he's being more aggressive, particularly in the downfield passing game. You look back at week 1 against Miami, week 2 against the Jets, the 4 most popular letters in the New England area were ADOT, average depth of target. There were a lot of concerns. Is he too conservative? Will he ever be aggressive? Can he make downfield throws? Are they afraid of letting him do that? Are they going to handle him with kid gloves, baby gloves all season? But then you see, particularly that game against the Chargers, Jackson, there were some reads and throws that he made in that game where I think the Mac Jones of week 1 and 2 would have done something differently. I'm thinking specifically that he had a play where you had the 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry, Jono Smith, and a YY wing to the right. Henry runs the curl, Smith to the flat. The curl gets doubled. Smith is wide open in the flat on a 1st and 10. And I think Mac Jones week 1 or week 2 just takes that flat route throw and says, look, it's open, I'll throw it. But against the Chargers, he resets himself, comes to the backside, has a deep post route, over route from Nelson Aguilar, and he throws it for a huge gain. And, I don't think the Mac Jones of week 1 or 2 does that, but he's doing that now. And so that's good to see from his developmental standpoint. When you look at what they're asking him to do conceptually, it's in many ways similar to what they were asking Tom Brady to do early in his career. There's a lot of stuff to the backs of the tight ends, a lot of stuff in the screen game. Last week against the Panthers, he only threw it 18 times. That was more of a defensive win than anything else, but he's showing you signs each week that, he's figuring some things out. He's taking some steps forward each week. And as far as rookie quarterback development goes, that's what you want to see. You want to see them better by the end of the season than they were when they started. And for Mac Jones, I think he's on that path.
Without question. Since you brought up Carolina, what did you make of his incident on the field with Brian Burns? And now Brian Burns is dealing with an ankle injury. Did you think it was a dirty move by Jones? Like, I want your opinion on that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think his initial reaction was, I got hit, ball is out, I don't want to give up a strip sack touchdown. So he grabbed him to try to prevent him from making a scoop and score touchdown. The initial thing I don't have a problem with. Where I sort of diverge from perhaps, conventional wisdom in the New England area is you can see from different angles. There was an end zone angle. There was kind of a sideline angle where initially he grabs him, but then Jones kind of can see what's happening. And I think he can have a clear view of, okay, Burns doesn't have the football. And then he hits him with a sort of a leg whip and a roll over. I mean, that's kind of where I'm like, okay, you're initially grabbing the guy like, all right, you're trying to prevent a scoop and score touchdown. You're not sure what's going on. It's chaos in the moment. But when you've got a clear view of things, and not only do you not let go, you then hit him with like the leg whip and roll into him and take him down like that. I think that was a bit much. It wouldn't surprise me at all Jackson, if his wallet's 5 digits lighter
Yeah.
come Thursday morning. I know Burns addressed the media today, and he basically said, "Look, I'd like to have an apology, but it's not coming." And he ended his comments on it with, "I wish my D-line brother some happy hunting." So, it's clear that there's going to be some bad blood there, and it wouldn't surprise me if some other defensive linemen, try to put a little extra in when they get shots at Mac Jones going forward, because you don't want to hurt somebody. You don't want to injure somebody on a moment like that. So ultimately, look, I think the initial reaction, I kind of take him at his word that he thought he might have had the football. But I do think that right after that, there was a moment where he could realize, okay, he doesn't have the ball. And instead of letting go, he hit him with the leg lock, leg whip situation.
And all eyes will probably be on Myles Garrett this weekend to see if he potentially goes after him. I'm anxious to hear his comments on it if the media brings it up on Friday when Myles usually talks. But yeah, I mean, that was just a bad situation. And I agree with you. I think he will get a nice little fine from the league coming for that move for sure. Jones comes into a situation, obviously he supplants Cam Newton, but he came into a situation where the cupboard wasn't bare on offense. I know a lot of people in the past couple of years were down on the Patriots skill positions, but they have a solid running back trio right now. But the Patriots go out in the offseason, Mark, and they spent more than I think anybody ever foreseen them doing. And they did it really at the skill positions, mostly bringing in Nelson Aguilar from the Raiders, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, both established tight ends in the league, and Kendrick Bourne as well. Were you shocked when they went out was spending like drunken sailors, and how has the return investment been so far on all those players?
Jackson, I wasn't really surprised. I know it was kind of against the norm of what Belichick does and how the Patriots can typically conduct business, but they knew going into this offseason, they knew last year, for example, during the Cam Newton season, that they were going to have a ton of money freed up in free agency. And so they had an opportunity to address a number of different holes. Obviously, the 2 tight ends, they had Matthew Judon, they had, the receivers, Bourne and Aguilar, they had Jalen Mills. I mean, they made a number of additions on the defensive side of the ball. They bring Kyle Van Noy back. And, so I think it went against conventional Belichick sort of handling of free agency, but it was the first time in a long time that they really had a ton of money to spend. And so they put it to use. I think the returns are largely solid. Looking at the offensive side of the ball, Henry and Jones have sort of developed a good little relationship. They've developed some chemistry, and they've done some things with Hunter Henry in the past in games, some ISO stuff and things like that, where you could see that he's maybe becoming a favorite, not the favorite, but a favorite target for the young quarterback. Smith has been, sort of the outlet / blocking tight end of the two. And we probably could have seen that coming for years, dating back to his time in Tennessee. Bill Belichick has been raving about Jonnu Smith as a blocker. And so this probably shouldn't have been a surprise. Aguilar and Bourne have had some moments, but this is a passing game that really runs through the tight ends and the backs right now. And so, there might be opportunities down the road for those guys to contribute more as Jones sort of gets more comfortable attacking downfield. But right now it's a tight end running back focused passing attack. But I mean, the big name, Matthew Judon, he's had such an impact on this defense. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about him, but he's really allowed them to do some different things defensively, particularly in the past couple of weeks, that are also a diversion from the norm from what we've seen from Bill Belichick defenses, but he's been a huge acquisition for them.
Yeah, without question. I mean, the defense it's business as usual, as I called it when we talk about the Patriots defense. Obviously, 4th in scoring defense, 4th in takeaways so far this year. I mean, you have the usual cast of characters: McCourty, Hightower. You talked about they brought back Van Noy. They draft Christian Barmore in the 2nd round this year. JB Collins just came back recently, had a big interception last week in Carolina. But J.C. Jackson, their best corner, and then you mentioned Matt Judon, big free agent signing, plucking him away from Baltimore, has come in and made a big impact with 9 sacks and 16 QB hits. Talk about Judon and of course the rest of this Patriots defense and how they've performed so far this year.
Yeah, and I think, Jackson, in sort of typical Patriots fashion, they took September and really most of October to sort of figure out what they wanted to be as a defense. And I think in the past 2 weeks, we've seen where they want to be. They want to be a zone coverage team, which is a diversion from the norm for the New England Patriots, for Bill Belichick, because traditionally he's been a cover one, man free, whatever you want to call it. But he wants to play man coverage on the back end. They'll have some variations thereof. They'll do some zone stuff here or there. But from weeks 1 through 7, their defensive backs were pretty much the top man coverage defenders in the league in terms of snaps played in man coverage. That's been wildly different weeks, 8 and 9. Last week against Carolina, for example, I think they had like 30 plus snaps in cover 2, another 20 or so in cover 3, just 8 in cover 1. They're becoming more of a zone coverage team. And why they're able to do that is because of what they can do up front right now. Because you mentioned Christian Barmore, the rookie from Alabama, he's given them a presence on the interior along with Lawrence Guy. And then you have Judon, Van Noy off the edges, with what they can do. They're in a position where they can get pressure with 4. So they can drop 7 into coverage. They can play with some zone stuff on the back end. They don't have to bring 5. They don't have to try to, get things covered up with a man coverage scheme behind that. They can play zone coverage and they can beat you with zone coverage because of what they can do up front, which has been really impressive to see from them. I think specifically to Judon, quickness off the edge, a bevy of pass rushing moves, and a solid pass rushing plan has certainly put him in a position to win some one-on-ones, sometimes early in the down. Where you can get pressure early in the play, a second or so in where the quarterback is just hitting his drop depth and he has to move as a result. But anytime you can generate that as a defense, you're in a good position to have success on that given play. And that's what he's offered them. In the secondary, JC Jackson has a nose for the football. Obviously, he had the pick 6 against the Carolina Panthers. That was in a zone coverage play. But then they had the interception. That was more of a man coverage snap against, Sam Darnold, but he's in good position there, plays with good technique, good trail technique, gets his eyes on the football, knows when to turn and make a play at the catch point. So all in all, they've started to realize where they want to be as a defense, how they can get there as a defense. And we've seen it the past 2 weeks. Even that Chargers game, I expected them to run a lot of single high stuff, cover 1, maybe some zone cover 3 stuff, given what Justin Herbert's splits were against, middle field close versus middle field open coverages, but they ran a lot of cover 2 against them. That Justin Herbert said they weren't really ready for that. So they seem to be figured out, okay, with the personnel we have up front, with what we've got in the secondary, we can play more zone coverage. We can keep stuff in front of us. We can keep eyes on quarterbacks and make some plays both up front and in the secondary. And I'd expect that to continue.
JC Jackson's such a fascinating player for me because, he has proven that he is a solid corner in this league, but yeah, he's still on a cheap contract. Is there any indication that the Patriots are going to try to extend him? Or are they going to let him walk into free agency this offseason?
I think the trade of Stephon Gilmore is the sign that they're going to, work on an extension with JC Jackson and try to get him signed long-term. And that was going into the season, going into the sort of Gilmore contract year, that was the decision that many Patriots fans and media members were wondering, okay, well, are they going to restructure, re-sign Gilmore and get a long-term deal done with him? If so, you're probably not bringing both of these guys back. Which one will they go all in on? And as we've seen in the past, Belichick has an opportunity to sign a younger player at a position. That's what he's going to do. And, I think that coupled with what they've been able to get from Jalen Mills, they've obviously got some stuff from, Juwan Williams, who they drafted in the second round a couple of years ago. Miles Bryant, the smaller safety / corner. They've got some stuff from him, some contributions from him as well. But I do think that, they're going to find a way to try to get a long-term deal done with JC Jackson because he's a very good coverage cornerback. And I know they've shifted to more zone coverage, but even in man coverage situations, he's very good. So I would imagine Jackson, is going to be their long-term plan at that position.
And that would be a wise move to say the least, because if he does hit the open market, he gets snatched up, I think,
absolutely
quickly.
Yeah.
If you're Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt and you're scheming up this game plan for Sunday, how would you best attack this Patriots defense for, looking at what Baker Mayfield, we might not have Nick Chubb, we won't have Kareem Hunt, and then, it's unknown at the running back position, but how would you attack this Patriots defense if you were the Browns offense?
I think you still want to do where you want to try to live where you have as an offense in terms of, work in the ground game. This is a Patriots team that does play with a lot of sub packages. You will see some light boxes. You try to exploit that. You look back at this matchup from a couple of years ago. Cleveland had a lot of success on the ground. I know the names are different, but this overall philosophy is kind of the same. And so I think you can run the ball on New England. I think in terms of the passing game, you want to look at a lot of what Dallas did. I mean, Dallas had some really good designs called where they were able to attack some of the coverages that the Patriots were using at that time. It was a lot of cover 1 stuff. Now you look at, okay, well, maybe they're more of a zone coverage team. Well, you want to attack up the seams, use the tight ends, throw it up heavy personnel, try to get tight ends up seams, against those coverages, whether it's zone or man, whether it's, two high or one high, you'll have opportunities to hit those secondary windows with those tight ends up the seams. I think those should be a part of the game plan. And ultimately, look, you don't want to give Mac Jones short fields. I mean, so in terms of what you do offensively, you want to eliminate mistakes and turnovers. You don't want to give Mac Jones a situation where he can just put together a 2-play drive and score. Like, if you have to punt and play defense, like, you might want to live with that, because it's a young quarterback who's going up against a pretty good defense of their own right, with guys that can get after him. And so I think, yeah, you want to eliminate mistakes, attack up the seams, try to run the football, particularly, up, both to the edges and even on the interior, and you can have success against this defense.
And then vice versa for, Mac Jones, how do the Browns look to contain Mac Jones? And even, the running game, you mentioned, Harris, Stevenson, and Bolden, the three-headed monster out of the New England backfield. How do the Browns look to shut that down coming Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you want to bring some pressure after Mac Jones. I think you want to blitz him at times. I know you can go a couple different ways on blitzing young quarterbacks. There's one school of thought that, look, if you blitz them, you just give it to them that hot read. But there's another school of thought that if you speed up their clock, you're going to have some success. You're going to force them into some mistakes. And I think you could do that against Mac Jones. You look at what Carolina tried to do, some of their mug looks. You look at what the Saints were able to do back a couple of weeks ago. They were able to get a lot of pressure on Mac Jones and force him into some mistakes and force him into some bad decisions. So I think you do want to bring some pressure. The matchup between sort of the run D of Cleveland and the New England Patriots run game, it wouldn't surprise me if McDaniels and company want to turn this into another ground game, if they want to try to run against that interior. I know defensive tackle is kind of a soft spot right now. If Cleveland is going to be soft in the interior, the Patriots might do a lot of stuff on the inside. They do inside zone, duo, gap power. They've got a varied run approach schematically. It wouldn't surprise me if they try to establish the run, get the run game going. And obviously that opens up where they really like to live in the passing game, which is those crossers to the tight ends, crossers and digs to the receivers behind those second level defenders off of run action. And so I think that's kind of the battlefield this game will be played on when the Patriots have the football. Can they get that ground game going on the inside to set up what they like to do in the play action passing game?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best way to attack if you are New England's offense, is to attack the Browns running, or the attack with the running game from the inside, because that outside the Browns have been able to shut opposing running backs down, but inside it just seems like time and time again the Browns are giving up 5, 6, 7 yards per carry early on in the game. Then they kind of adjust and seem to contain it for the most part during a game.
Yeah.
Mark, Belichick's been there. I think this is his 21st year, if I'm not mistaken, as the head coach. Is there any indication how much longer he's going to keep going? Obviously, with a rookie quarterback that's showing some promise in Mac Jones, the defense still doing its thing. And it seems like the Patriots, as early as this year, could be back in playoff contention, maybe in a year or two back in the Super Bowl contention. How much longer is Belichick going to keep going? Is there any indication that he has any signs of slowing down?
I mean, as of right now, Jackson, no. I mean, it looks like, Belichick seems happy with this team. He seems happy with the direction of this team. He seems happy with the young players that they have. In addition to Mac Jones, he's been very effusive with his praise of Christian Barmore. He doesn't certainly seem like he's showing any signs of slowing down. There's always speculation about, when he steps away, who could be next, given a run like he's had in New England. But I think for right now, he seems really happy with this team. He seems happy with the direction and the growth of this team. It seems like a standard Belichick team where they take September and October and figure things out, and they're playing better football come November and December. That's certainly what we've seen the past couple of weeks, coming off, and I think a pretty impressive win against the Los Angeles Chargers on the road. I thought that was okay. You've finally gotten over the hump, right? You had a close loss against the Buccaneers. You had another close loss against the Dallas Cowboys, but now you showed you can beat a team that's got a winning record. That's actually a good football team. It's not the Jets. It's not, the Carolina Panthers, who I know are in the playoff hunt, but Sam Darnold has certainly struggled. You've actually beaten a team that has a good resume of their own. So I think he feels confident about what they've put together. I think he's excited about the future. And so, in terms of a time frame, 3-5 years maybe, But I don't see him stepping away anytime soon. He seems to be loving what he's doing, and he's often told us in the media that, look, what else would I be doing? He's got the best job in the world, and so I'd expect him to stick around as long as he wants.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like he's a football lifer, kind of like a Bill Walsh, who just maybe he steps into the front office once he's done coaching and runs that department then. But I mean, yeah, I just don't see him slowing down anytime soon. What about Josh McDaniels? You know, obviously last time you were on the pod, Mark, we were talking about the prospect of Josh McDaniels becoming the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. I can say with all honesty, I'm as much as I wanted him, I'm glad we went the other direction with Kevin Stefanski, but he always seems to be a name at the top of the list when, you know, teams switch head coaches. Do you see him taking a bite again at becoming a head coach, or do you think he's content being the offensive coordinator in New England and potentially the heir apparent down the road?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the heir apparent, I mean, you look at Josh McDaniels, you look at Steve Belichick.
Yes.
Would the Patriots turn this over to Steve Belichick, who's basically their de facto defensive coordinator, their defensive play caller right now? You know, I think from McDaniels' standpoint, a lot of what his future looks like will be decided by Mac Jones. We know this league right now, there's a push to, when you draft a young quarterback, to pair them with a head coach that can develop that young quarterback. And if Mac Jones continues to develop well and continues to have success, there will be teams that will look at that and look at what Josh McDaniels has done with him and think, okay, well, we can do that, right? Like, we can go do that. You look at, say, for example, Mac Jones finishes the year really strongly. Really looks like, okay, yeah, this is definitely the guy. And the Chicago Bears decide to make a switch with their head coaching situation. That organization might look at Josh McDaniels and say, okay, he's the guy to develop Justin Fields, or you look at another organization that might go in a different direction with a young quarterback. Maybe it's Denver again. Maybe Denver decides, I know we tried this once, but now he's got a proven track record of actually developing a quarterback. We've got a general manager to handle the personnel side. McDaniels won't be making personnel decisions. We'll just trust him with developing the quarterback. So we're going to draft somebody, obviously, Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock. Maybe that's not the long-term answer. Maybe an organization like that would decide Josh McDaniels could be worth a second look. And so I think a lot of McDaniels' future as a potential NFL head coach around the league is going to be determined over the next couple of weeks and how well Mac Jones develops. Because if he's proven to the rest of the league that he can develop that young quarterback, that's going to get him in the door for some of these interviews.
Oh, without question. I think, yeah, like you said, if Jones continues to show growth as a rookie this year, I think teams will come knocking on the door again, despite the reservations that, people have had with him, obviously from the Denver days, the whole situation with the Colts. I mean, but I still like McDaniels. I'm just glad we went the direction of Stefanski, but I do like the idea of him, getting another shot at being a head coach, especially with the reputation that he can develop a young quarterback.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that will be the critical thing. If he's got that ability to put in front of a general manager, in front of an ownership group, that, look, I can develop a young quarterback. It wasn't just Tom Brady. I wasn't just, riding Tom Brady's coattails. I took a rookie quarterback, made him into a bona fide NFL starter, into a playoff caliber offense, and I could do that for you. That's a big card to play in an interview for a head coaching job.
Absolutely. Mark, as we wrap things up, you want to go ahead and give your prediction for Sunday's matchup, Browns versus Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, I do like the way that the Patriots have played recently. So I will say New England in this one, but I think it's going to be close. I mean, like a 23-20 kind of game. Yeah. I just like the way that the Patriots are trending on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Cleveland, look, you've got some COVID issues too. Yeah. You might have some different running backs in this game. You've got guys that might be out as a result. And so I think when it's said and done, it's going to be a close game, but I think New England pulls it out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a fun matchup. We just picked up 2 running backs off the street, and we have Dearness Johnson, who obviously was the national darling a couple weeks ago after his performance against Denver. So it's tough to make a call on this right now. I'm going to wait till later this week when me and Anthony sit down to preview the rest of this game. But yeah, I expect a close one. It can definitely go either way. And obviously a lot of the football world's going to be watching it because it is a pivotal AFC matchup.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the better games of the slate this week, and it's one that I'm really excited to see happen.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Mark, go ahead and plug everything you got going, plug your Twitter, plug where your work's at, and we'll get on out of here.
Appreciate that, man. Well, best way to find me is on Twitter, like you said, at Mark Schofield. USA Today's Touchdown Wire, Big Blue View, Blue Green Nation, Pat's Pulpit, the Matt Waldman RSP Quick Game podcast, Matt and I do each week. But on Twitter, at Mark Schofield, that's where you see each Monday or so the three throw series where, I take 3 clips from quarterbacks and splice them together and break them down for you. I have a lot of fun doing it. People seem to enjoy it. So you can see those on Twitter at Mark Schofield.
And as always, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Jack McCurry08, as well as the Dogland at the Dogland. Mark, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate you. And until next time, Browns fans, go Browns.